Good afternoon. Welcome to the USA International Harp Competitions Composition Forum. I'm Ann Young. I served as the jury president for this wonderful event and contest. I serve on the board of directors and a proud alum of the Indiana University Jacobs School of Music. We want to welcome you here to Bloomington, Indiana, as well as to our viewers online on the live stream. This is a wonderful event that has been happening with this triennial harp competition, and it's a local to global event, connections and creativity. And so I'm very pleased to welcome today the director of the Ruth USA International Harp Competition, the Ruth Inglefield Composition Contest, Sonia Inglefield, who is now director and has served as secretary of this composition contest since its beginning. So warm welcome. Please do silence your electronic devices. And with that, we will start the Composition Forum 2025.
Thank you so much. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of the amazing people who make the composition contest possible. Suzanne McDonald for her initial inspiration, Indiana University for the generous hospitality, Elizabeth Hanen and Emmanuel Saison for their continued support, Ann Young for her steadfast collaboration, Fran Marseille for her enthusiastic assistance, Lyon & Healy for publishing our winning piece, Salvi Harps for providing very generously the Salvi Electra for today's performance, the American Harp Society for providing the Composer's Award, Mario Falcao for donating the prize for the best performance of the winning piece, and Don and Sandra Freund for sponsoring this forum. The composition contest began in 2003 as part of the USAIHC's mission to promote the harp and harp music. In 2019, it was posthumously named for my mother, Dr. Ruth Inglefield, whose vision and direction during the first 6 cycles shaped it into a contest worthy of the prestige and respect associated with the USA International Harp Competition. Mom was a student of Marcel Grangeny, received a Premier Prix from the Paris Conservatoire with Pierre Jamet, earned a PhD in musicology from Cincinnati, and was professor of harp at the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore for 30 years. Her dedication to promoting new music for the harp is what created this composition forum. She believed that although only one piece can win, many are worthy of recognition. Submissions to the contest are 6 to 8 minutes in length, and the winning piece becomes required repertoire for stage 3 of the performance competition. Other instruments or electronics may be included as long as no other personnel are required. The work must not be published or commercially recorded and must not have won any other awards. Qualifying scores are reviewed by an international panel of harpists and one composer. The scores are anonymous, and the jury do not know each other's identities. Composer and jury names are only released after the final decision is made. Before reaching our jury, all of the scores are reviewed for qualification by our screening committee. Pieces are removed if they're too short, too long, or too easy for an international competition. Tremendous thanks to Thea Kammerling, our contest secretary, Emily Levin, and Kaori Otake Ogawa for accomplishing this vital task quickly, thoughtfully, and efficiently. This year, we received 73 applications from 23 different countries. Our jury included composer Chen Yi and harpists Mariko Anraku, Sylvain Blasel, Katerina Englikova, Maricela Gonzalez, and Jessica Zhao. This was our 8th contest, and we've never repeated a jury member. Here is an alphabetical listing of the esteemed jury we've had the honor to work with so far. Next time, I don't think it will fit on one slide. We keep a running list of countries which have been represented since the contest began. This year, we added 3 new ones: Lebanon, Lithuania, and Slovenia, bringing the grand total to 576 compositions from 52 countries. Although only one piece can win, many are worthy of being heard. For that reason, the Composition Forum was created. Today's program features the 4 other works which made it to the final round of judging. They will be performed by young professionals from around the country who are passionate about contemporary music. After their performances, you will hear from our winning composer, Kalen Smith, and have an opportunity to ask him questions. You will hear his composition, Bioluminescence, during stage 3 tomorrow. First on the program is Charon, Nocturne for Harp by Caroline Lizotte. Most of us are already familiar with Lizotte, a harpist and composer from Canada. Named Composer of the Year at Pre-Opus 2023, she will be receiving the Anne Stockton Memorial Award for New Music at the 2026 One Harp World Conference in Toronto. She has been on faculty at the University of Montreal since 2010. Our first performer, Anna Dunlap, is principal harpist of the Huntsville Symphony. She will tell us a bit about the piece. Please welcome Anna.
Hello, everyone. Is it on? No.
I can project. We'll go with that. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Dunlap. I am very honored to be performing Caroline Lizotte's piece, Charon, today as a part of the Composition Forum. I would like to kind of read a little bit from her preface.
Now with a working microphone, maybe, to give you a little bit more insight into the work. So this was commissioned by harpist Heather Cornelius and was supported by the Council des Arts and Letters du Québec and the Canada Council for the Arts. The nocturne is a form of the Romantic era particularly cherished for communicating feelings. The work begins and ends with a bourdon, a simple clothespin placed on the base of the very last low string, also detuned to a low A and almost inaudible. Thanks to the wood-on-wood vibration, one can hear Charon's tonic purr sound and enter into isolation and solitude. The soft A major tonality also always suggests hope. I also opted for descending chromaticism. At the harp, chromaticism does not give us much flexibility, but we have ways to achieve it. The playing of the pedals, the alternation of twelfths and octaves harmonics, the sliding of any metallic rods on the strings. One of my favorite contemporary pieces for harp, Wir Nacht Saison by composer Claude Baker, has used the latter method on a single string. The technique, however, requires both hands to produce the effect, one to articulate the metal object and the other to play. I wanted to use it this time for more precise pitches, leaving out the fast and impactful chromatic glissandi. In Charon, I tend to make possible the fretless with one hand, leaving out so that the other hand is free for normal harp playing. Thanks to the bottleneck inserted in the right hand index finger, I release not only the left hand, but also the thumb, middle, and ring finger of my right hand, allowing it even more possibilities, but with a lot of work and adaptation. The idea of playing with the metal finger seemed to me the best analogy for this work, to honor the existences that have to live with an obstacle or with illness, innate or acquired. I wanted to show the rigidity and harshness of a disease with a sound that expresses pain and whose prosthesis is part of the performance of this nocturne, exclusive to the harp, and requires an iron fist from the harpist. Please enjoy.
So Damn If I'm Foolish by Alexander Thomas. Thomas is a harpist, composer, and teacher from the UK. He has a master's in performance from the Norwegian Academy of Music and studied composition at the University of Sussex. Giving the US premiere of his piece today, we have Evelyn Tynert, a current student here at the Jacobs School of Music. Please welcome Evelyn.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our composition forum today. As you already heard, my name is Evelyn, and I get to present Alexander Thomas's, what I would likely nickname, it's a long title so I always shorten it, Finally Someone. And that's where I keep it at because it's easier to say. But Alexander Thomas, we had a wonderful conversation, and he has so many lovely inspirations for this piece, one of which is poetry. Alexander Thomas is not only a composer, but also a poet and writes his own. Here is the poem that accompanies this piece. Time, it's love, a fleeting spark, a temporary moment in space. We hear a confluence of time, tempers, private versions of myself. Falling waves like hokusai build a greater wave, built of bells, of clock chimes, of time. There is another quote that accompanies this poem by Claude Debussy. This is a very personal piece. Claude Debussy once said, pardon my French pronunciation, "Ce sont plutôt conversations entre le piano et soi," which translates to, and rather they are conversations between the piano and I. In this case, this type of piano, so the upright harp. It'll be a very private piece. It's a very personal journey for the composer, but it's also designed to be a personal and emotional journey for the performer himself or herself and the audience as well. This piece is packed full of all these little motives and special figures that keep coming back in very many different ways. The composer actually pulled motives from his other pieces throughout his lifetime into this piece as well, and they're all kind of hidden throughout the main theme. The main theme in this piece tries to start over and over and over, and sometimes gets interrupted, sometimes doesn't get to finish, but it's discovering itself. It's finding out, what is it supposed to be? What am I supposed to be thinking? It's like trying to figure out what your thoughts are and working through an emotional and spiritual and just journey of growth throughout your life. In this piece, you'll be hearing themes of heartbreak, of pensive thoughts, of reflection, of nostalgia, also of anger, and finally of a resolve of all of that. So it's a very personal journey. I'm going to be pouring my energy into it as well. But as you heard with the poem, there's also this theme of time throughout this personal journey. This passage of time that sometimes feels fast, sometimes it feels slow, but it keeps on going and going. You'll hear the time motive, which might sound familiar to you. It's the Westminster chime, so the Westminster bells of the church. Sometimes it's a cuckoo clock, sometimes it's other churches, but it's the dun, 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 dun. You'll hear that motive all throughout the piece in so many different ways as a constant reminder to the main character that time is still moving on. Now, please enjoy Finally Someone.
artist premiere, this one including electronics. Event Horizon, The Point of No Return by Ramin Amin Tafrashi and USAIHC from Iran. This is the first time we've had a collaborative work in the final round. Both based in the Netherlands, Tafrashi is a composer and pianist, Shayeste is an electronic music producer and violinist. Thea Kammerling, our contest secretary and a professional harpist based in Baltimore, will tell you a bit about it before she performs. Please welcome Thea.
Hi everyone, my name is Thea and I'm really excited to share this piece with you today. So this piece was named after an astrophysical term, event horizon, which refers to a theoretical boundary in space beyond which events cannot affect an external observer. So commonly associated with a black hole, it's the boundary where nothing that occurs inside can exit or escape, not even light. So in this piece, the event horizon is narrated through the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Many of you may know this story. There's many different versions, but Orpheus is represented here by the amplified harp and Eurydice by the electronics track. So in the story, in Greek mythology, the musician Orpheus travels to the underworld to bring back Eurydice, who has died. Hades allows them to leave the underworld together, but he warns them they cannot look back at any point in their journey. So once they reach the land of the living, Orpheus steps out into the light. He looks back at Eurydice to celebrate their return, but unfortunately realizes she is still a step behind him in the darkness, and she has to remain in the underworld forever. So that moment marks the event horizon of their story and the point of no return. So hope you enjoy.
South Korea. Jung just finished a master's degree in composition at Bowling Green State University and is starting a PhD at USAIHC. Discussing and performing his work is Caitlin Miller, the current American Harp Society concert artist. Please welcome Caitlin.
Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Anne and Sonia, and everyone who's made this event possible. I have had the great privilege of working with Jansek for about 5 or 6 years, and so this piece was really fun to collaborate on together, and I just wanted to read what his thoughts were when writing the piece. Kinetic dissipation is my exploration of how energy moves, changes, and ultimately fades. The concept of entropy, or the gradual loss of energy, fascinated me while writing this piece. I found myself thinking about how we experience this in music. Sometimes, energy dissipates gradually, like a soft breeze, while at other times it crashes and vanishes in an instant, leaving behind an eerie stillness. He goes on to talk about how writing this for solo harp felt really natural because when you pluck a string, there's this instant given energy and then this instant dissipation when the sound fades. He said there's something beautiful in this process because there's something that feels both fleeting and infinite. So in this piece, you're going to hear a lot of rapid energy gain and then sometimes some moments of stillness. And when I was playing the piece, it just felt to me as if it somewhat resembled a feeling of burnout. So I asked him if I had permission to share that personal thought as a performer because to me it felt as though you're giving a lot of energy and you're giving into something that you're passionate about, but then sometimes maybe you get sick or life gets in the way and you have to just take a moment of stillness. So wherever the journey of your imagination takes you, I really hope you enjoy kinetic dissipation.
And now we come to this year's winner, Kaylin Smith, harpist and composer from Canada. Currently finishing a master's degree in composition at McGill University, his works have received multiple awards from the Canadian Society of Composers, Authors, and Music Publishers, and in 2023, he won the National Youth Orchestra Mentorship Commission. Smith's pieces range from solo to chamber to orchestral concert music and on to music for games and films. Bioluminescence received these glowing comments from our jury. Successful color and timbre, engaging, idiomatic, and effective. The composer knows the instrument very well. It's effective music and detailed program notes, and an interesting addition to the harp repertoire. Please welcome Kaylin Smith.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much, everyone. And thanks to Sonia for introducing me. I'm really grateful, and it's amazing, honestly. It kind of makes me speechless at times. I'll start by thanking everyone who helped make this journey possible for me. So I started harp at a very young age, about age 7. And my longtime teacher was Carolyn Leonardelli. Eventually, of course, left her and moved on to university, but she was really instrumental in my first steps as a harpist and as a composer, funnily enough. And I'd like to thank my just finished my last term with her, Jennifer Schwartz at McGill. She's been really helpful, especially on the contemporary music side, telling me what not to do and reminding me that my big hands are not what most harpists have. So my music can be challenging, or I have to rewrite certain things. And then I'd also like to thank my composition professors, Sean Ferguson, Chris Harmon, and Jean Lesage, who all have helped me develop my own personal language. So I realize bioluminescence is probably a bit of a mystery. You will hear it tomorrow from these stage 3 competitors, but I will give you kind of a brief introduction to it now, talk about some of my thought processes behind it, and what it was like writing it, some of the ideas in the piece, and then where the title comes from. So my journey writing for the harp, funnily enough, was actually fairly challenging. I found the fact that I was so intimate with the instrument actually gave me some problems because I know so much about playing it, I know so much of the great pieces on the harp that it was just hard to compare myself to that. And then there was also the aspect of whenever I would sit down and try writing something, whenever I would try improvising, my muscle memory would kind of default back to a lot of the sort of like bass and arpeggios and chords, which is, it's amazing and it's idiomatic and it sounds great, but it wasn't what I was looking for, and I was trying to find a much more personal way of expressing myself. So then we kind of fast forward a few years, and I've had, done some studies at McGill, and I eventually decided to tackle writing another harp piece, and bioluminescence was that piece. So it was a piece I was very happy with in terms of my own personal kind of journey and learning to write for an instrument I'm so familiar with, but in a new way, and thinking about composition for harp in a new way. So yeah, it kind of emerged out of electroacoustic music classes I had been taking at the time, so the idea of these sound objects from musique concrète. So you have these kind of things which are presented and then you develop them over the course of the piece. So the piece is roughly divided into 3 sections. You have the first section, the middle section, and then kind of a prime version of the first section. So let me not trip over cables. There we go. So the first section starts off with this glissando in the low register of the harp, essentially this sort of gesture. And then that kind of rings for a while, sets up this dark atmosphere. And then in the very top register of the harp, you hear this very quiet bisbigliando, which comes a little bit later after that, something like that. I haven't practiced in a few weeks. I'm taking a break. Yeah. So it starts like that, and you have the dialogue between those two very different ideas, this low kind of rumbling, and then this very high, quiet sound. And both of those are in dialogue with each other. They start to evolve and change until eventually they collide. So you have the low register, the low idea kind of rising in pitch, and you have the high idea going down in pitch. And then once they hit in the middle, that launches into the second section of the piece. And so the second section is very colorful, it's very much faster. You've got kind of a continual stream of notes. You've got melodies accented by different colorations on the harp, so stuff like harmonics, xylophone effects, prédadatab, etc. And then the final section, again, kind of returns us back to the idea of the bisbigliando and the descending down into the low register of the harp. Yeah, and so last thing to cover, I suppose, is the title of the piece. So this was a case in which the title came after I had basically written the piece, funnily enough. That's how it works sometimes for composition. Sometimes you come up with a cool name, and sometimes you don't. You think, oh, well, I'm writing something, and eventually it'll get there. So for me, bioluminescence kind of tells a narrative that I was imagining, especially when I was learning to play this piece and when I was making the recording of it for this contest. So you start out in the depths, the abyssal region of the harp, and you have these little flashes of color and light, exactly like imagine the sort of ocean floor, and you have these creatures with, bioluminescence. They have these little natural light that emerges and kind of flickers. And so you have that. So you start out very dark, and you have these little lights that appear, and then those gain in volume and power, and then that launches us into the second section, where you have almost this dance-like character, where all these fish, sea creatures, are kind of flying around and floating, and you have this kind of dance of light, if you will. And then the final section, all that kind of dissipates and goes away, and then you settle back to the ocean floor and kind of the darkness, but in a positive way, not a super sad way. Yeah, and I would say that this was also a piece where I was exploring the idea of using more unmeasured musical notation. So roughly 50% of the piece does not have a time signature. There's a lot of freedom of time that the performers have. And for me, it's going to be really interesting to see how they interpret that, because I think there is a lot more of this piece is a challenge of interpretation rather than technique. Although some parts in the middle, as I was playing them during the recording, I was going, oh no, why did I write this? But yeah. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing the performers tomorrow. And yeah, thanks so much.
I think this one works. And I think this microphone works. You just have to hold it really close to your mouth. So at this point, we'd like to welcome questions for Kaylin, Yancek, or any of the performers. Does anybody have a question? Any performers doing Kaylin's piece tomorrow want to ask the actual composer a question now?
Jury members?
You said the title came after you had started composing. Where bioluminescence, what's the background of that? Because I think you mentioned a little bit of that, but what is more of that inspiration that kind of came after the composition of the piece? What is the bioluminescence part of it?
I would say it is something maybe I was thinking about in the background, but it didn't quite inform the piece as much. I distinctly remember seeing this video on YouTube of, I'm not exactly sure where in the world it was, but you had this, they were filming on a beach, and they had these waves coming in with the tide, and then for some reason there was just an amazing amount of these bioluminescent creatures right on the surface of it, so you'd see the wave kind of going up and down, and then you'd see these lights also going up and down. And I remember watching that not too long before I actually ended up writing the piece. So I think for me, it was in the background. I hadn't quite identified that as the primary inspiration, but yeah, so you can imagine that imagery as well for the piece.
We have a question in the back.
I'm being nice. I could be loud enough for you to hear me anyway. But my question is, there's a reference that you also work on music for other purposes, for chamber orchestra, for video games, for whatever it is. So can you talk a little bit about how you approach those different media or different groupings in your composition when you're thinking for one instrument or for a whole orchestra?
That's a good question. So I would say, funnily enough, when I was writing this piece, I was thinking a lot about orchestra, because in the orchestra you have so many instruments and colors, and harp also has a lot of colors. And I've considered thinking about orchestrating this, although it could be interesting. But I've realized that my background as a harpist kind of gives me an interesting perspective on orchestra and combining colors and all that. But when it comes to writing for stuff like chamber and orchestra and games, they very much are connected in ways and connected in interesting ways. But then there's also the side of they're completely different. So you have to be familiar with a lot of different repertoire and a lot of different aspects to them. So for orchestra, it's a very kind of standard, homogenized sort of unit, and you have to write in very specific ways or else they might not be happy with you. But then in chamber, you're of course given a lot more freedom to do crazy things, and performers are generally more understanding if you write something that's questionable, but they're like, okay, we'll try. Yeah, and then I've really enjoyed writing for films and games because it's I don't want to say it's easier, but it's sort of relaxing in a way where it's a little bit simpler, and you have a lot more to work with. You have someone coming to you and saying, hey, do this. And I go, oh, and I have more constraints to work within, which is actually really fun as a composer as well, is to have this tiny box and then figure out, okay, what can I do within this box that's interesting? Sometimes starting from nothing is much harder. Yeah.
Hi, I was a harpist that had to work on your piece, and I guess I had a I had a question with regards to one section. That I guess it was the intended effect, and it was in the last section of your piece where there was the vibrato, and it was the different colorations of like C natural.
Yeah.
And I guess my big question was, what was the intention for the vibrato effect? Because I was trying many ways to make it super effective and falling short.
Yeah, so, like you said, in that section I have C harmonics and the kind of the fifth octave and the fifth harmonic. I guess my idea with the vibrato is that you have the sort of wavering of the note of the pitch, and then that connects back to the bisbigliando idea, where you have the sort of pitch, you have the speed of it accelerating and decelerating. So you can do something where you have the vibrato start fast, you can go slow, essentially fast, and then slow. I know the note doesn't have a lot of resonance, so you kind of have to just roll with it. But yeah, that was the idea.
Thank you.
Nothing else? Well, thank you all so much for coming, and congratulations to our performers today. Thank you for coming. If the performers and our composer could come up to the stage, we could photos, and I believe the sponsor of our composition forum, Don Freund, is in the audience. If he would, yes, thank you so much for sponsoring. Maybe you come up and we'll have some photos. Thank you. Flowers.